Okay. Hello everyone. This is my B2B presentation. The topic is reconfigurable and intelligent architectures for deep learning algorithms. Now, let's first talk about the problem statement. So it is a DL framework for wideband spectrum sensing. Now, the wideband spectrum in wireless communications is divided into bands and allocated to different users. Now, these users could be licensed, unlicensed, or shared users. Now, at real time, the occupancy of these bands can vary. I mean, some of these bands can be vacant, while some others can be occupied. So, these vacant bands can be reallocated to the users for their transmissions. Now, to determine the status, whether which band is occupied and which is vacant, it requires sending some additional control signals to the base station, which increases the overhead. So, to solve this, there is a paper by Sumit Sir students in which the authors they propose a novel deep learning based architecture to predict the status of the bands without any other communication overhead. So this deep learning architecture is called DLWSS. Now I will show you the presentation flow. First, I'll introduce the hardware implementation of DLWSS through some block diagrams. Then we will discuss the dataset and the evaluation metrics. Then we will discuss orthogonal matching pursuit or OMP, which is an iterative algorithm for the same spectrum sensing problem, which is used in common literature. So we will use this to benchmark DLWSS and to find out which algorithm is better. Then we'll talk about the DLWSS implementation on hardware and its comparison with OMP. Then we'll talk about the optimizations for DLWSS. Then finally, I'll demo the GUI which I prepared for the to visualize the outputs of from the FPGA in an interpretable manner. And finally, I'll discuss the challenges faced, and then we'll conclude. Now, let's go to the design architecture. So this is an overall block diagram of the DLWSS on hardware. There is two phases. The first one is the training phase, and the second one is the inferencing on hardware phase. So in the phase one, what we do is there is a subnequest sampler from whose outputs are A and Y. This is pre-processed to convert this into XN, which is basically your input to your deep learning model. And this deep learning model is trained, and this entire thing is coded on a framework like PyTorch or Keras to train the model. And following the training, the weights of this model is extracted. Then the second phase is the inferencing on hardware. So in the second phase, what happens is you develop the model on the for the FPGA using some Vivado or Vivado HLS. Then you implement the pre-processing also, and finally you load the weights of your trained model into this FPGA model, and then you give the test set and you start inferencing on your FPGA. So the phase one was mostly focused in the first semester of my BTP. So I will focus my discussion on the phase two part. Now the pre-processing. So in the pre-processing, the inputs to the pre-processing algorithm are the outputs for the subnequest sampler. So this A and Z are the outputs. So the main operations that happen is a pseudo transpose operation of A, then some matrix multiplication, and then there is a concat, then there is separation of the real and imaginary part, and finally normalization. So this Xn is the normalized X, which is to be used by the deep learning model. So the model is both trained on the pre-processed input, and you also infer on the pre-processed inputs. Now this is the DLWSS, I mean overall view of the CNN architecture. So the inputs is of 14 cross 299 cross 2, which is the two real and imaginary channels. Then you have three three convolution layers, and then there is a fully connected layer with 14, because there are 14 bands which has to be predicted. So this will have 14 neurons, and then finally a 14 cross 1 output. Now let's talk about the dataset. So since our dataset has signals which has some bands as occupied and some of the bands are sparse, we can divide we generate different datasets based on levels of sparsity ranging from 1 to 7. We split this since handling 7 datasets can be a huge, can be a bit of a task. So we split it into two data sets. One we call the sparse data set, in which the signals with 1 to 3 occupied bands are present. So it's called a high sparsity data set because only 1 to 3 bands are occupied out of 14. Then the second is a dense data set. In this, the signals with 4 to 7 occupied bands are present. So this is called a low sparsity data set or the dense data set. Now, we discussed the evaluation metrics. So the first evaluation metric is probability of detection of all bands, which is basically you see the model predicts gives you a 14 cross 1 vector y pred. You have your ground truth, which is the y true. Then you count how many bands were correctly predicted by the model out of the total bands. So that is given by this expression. Then we have another metric called probability of detection of occupied bands. So in this metric, what we do is we only check how good the model is predicting the occupied band. So we only check whether the uh, the occupied bands in my ground truth are correctly predicted by the model. So the purpose of having these two metrics is that if you just have the probability PDAB or the probability detection of all bands, then the problem which happens is, let's say we have a very sparse signal which has only one occupied band. In that case, even if the deep learning model predicts all the bands to be zero, even then it will have a very high accuracy, around 13 by 14, because yeah, only one band is occupied, so the accuracy will be 13 by 14, but it is high. But that's not actually correct because the model is just predicting everything to be zero. So in those cases for low sparsity signals, the PDOB is a much better metric, while for high sparsity signal we can look at PDAB. Now I discuss the OMP. Now I discuss the OMP, which is the iterative algorithm for doing the spectrum sensing problem. So what happens in OMP, the major parts which we need to know is that this k, I mean, and the number of iterations for OMP is determined by the number of occupied bands. This means that OMP requires your knowledge of the sparsity beforehand while running. Then the overall idea of the algorithm is that it initializes a residual. Then following every iteration, the value of this residual keeps on decreasing, and the expectation is that after k iterations, the residual value will be very small, close to zero. So in every one of these iterations, the OMP spits out one of the occupied bands. So if there are 4 occupied bands, this will run 4 times, and it will give you 4 values for which of the bands are occupied. Now this OMP algorithm, it was implemented on hardware by Animesh, who is also a student under Sumit sir. So I'll just show you the analysis which I performed on this implementation. So now we have OMP with sparsity knowledge. Now how can we now we try to find ways in which we can reduce this dependency on the sparsity. So what if I don't give it the sparsity knowledge? In that case, this k has to be replaced by some value epsilon, which that epsilon will be some convergence constant, and we see whether the norm of this r is less than that epsilon. If that is true, then you end the loop. Basically, this k is replaced by checking the value of the residual and seeing if it is less than some small constant epsilon. Now, from our experimental study on the data set, we find that the value of this epsilon is actually varying both for different sparsities and for different SNRs. So this is a problem because we can't define a fixed epsilon for which everything works. So I mean, this analysis, it has for every SNR, it has, and every sparsity, it has one value of epsilon. Now in a real world setting, we can expect to know the SNR value of the signal. In that case, we can compress this into this. So this is basically averaged across all the sparsities. Since we know the SNR, we can just have one epsilon value per SNR. So if I have a signal of SNR -10, I can use this value of epsilon. If I have this for -16, I can use this value of epsilon. Now this AWG and Rayleigh and Rician, they are just channels which are used to model the real-time transmission, dispersion, etc., dispersion and other interferences in a signal. So this is to make the signals as close to real world signals as possible. But for us, these are just three different data sets. Now we use that scheme to run OMP without the sparsity information, and on comparing it with the conventional OMP, we find out that for sparse data, for which the probability detection of occupied bands is more important, for that we see that the OMP with sparsity information has significantly outperformed the OMP without sparsity information. And even for dense data, where we look at the probability of detection of all bands, in that also the uh, OMP with sparsity information is consistently outperforming the OMP without sparsity. So from this, we can conclude that using OMP without sparsity means you will be having a lot of accuracy degradation. So OMP the OMP algorithm is best used when you have the exact sparsity information and not with some convergence constant epsilon. Now I come back to DLWSS and I'll discuss the pre-processing algorithm on hardware. So as we discussed before, the pre-processing has a pseudo-inverse computation. Now, it also has some matrix multiplications, but matrix multiplications are very much optimized on hardware. So the pseudo-inverse operation, it basically it can be broken down into a normal square matrix inversion by doing this conjugate transpose into A conjugate transpose into A, and then you take the normal inverse of the A square matrix in which is done by LU factorization, and then following LU factorization you can find the inverse of that matrix, and then following the inverse you can convert it back into the rectangular matrix, which will become your pseudo inverse of the matrix. Now there is a Xilinx documentation on this LU factorization part, so I use that along with some modification for complex numbers, and I integrate that into this pseudo inverse algorithm, and that is how the pre-processing is implemented. Now I'll come to the convolution implementation on hardware. So there are we use a tiled convolution method. So in most real world cases, we can't load the entire model. We can't load all the inputs and all the weights into the on-chip memory to perform the computation. So in that case, what happens is your block RAM is usually limited, and as a result, you cannot load everything. So uh, yeah, so what we do is we load everything in chunks. So these chunks are called tiles. For example, the input will be loaded in tiles. Similarly, the weights and the output will also be written to in tiles. So we for every tile we perform this small convolution, and then we add it into a temporary variable which is the output tile, and then the output tile will be updated, and when the entire computation is completed, then the output tile will be written back into the DRAM. In this way, we can piece by piece compute the convolution without having too much load on our hardware. Now, this is the hardware architecture for the both the convolution and the fully connected part. So on the left, you can see the convolution architecture. In this, the most basic operation is the multiply and accumulate operation. So first, what happens is you load the weight tile and you load the input tile into the block RAM. Then you take the specific elements and then you multiply them, and then you add them to the previous output tile which is computed, and then following this multiply and accumulate operation, you send the data back into the BRAM. Now, following that, after your entire partial outputs are completed, you send that O tile back into the you send that O tile back into the DDR memory. Just before sending, you do this activation, which is the ReLU activation in this case. So these pink boxes, these can be parallelized. So you can have 10 of these pink boxes running in parallel while inside one of these blue boxes, and even you can have 10 of these blue boxes also running in parallel. So I mean, the scope of parallelism is widely dependent on your system's capabilities. I mean, on your hardware capabilities. Now, the fully connected layer is also like kind of similar because the inherent operation is still multiply and accumulate, but of course the outer loops are different because in fully connected you loop over the input neurons and the output neurons. Again, the low weights and inputs are loaded into BRAM first, then computed and then sent back to the DDR after computing the sigmod activation. Now we'll see the impact of tile sizes on the performance and the area of the design. So as the tile sizes increases, I, as a tile, as the size of my tile increases, I can perform more of the operations in parallel. Yeah, right. So if I have a 16, 16, 16, 16 tile, then I can perform like 16 rows and 16 columns. I can do their dot products in parallel. So as a result, consequently, my speed up with respect to software also increases, which can be seen from this graph. And correspondingly, my hardware utilization is also expected to increase because as and when I parallelize, I will use more DSPs, I will use more block RAMs and more LUTs, which will increase the resource consumption. Now, the limit which we could get to was around 13, but this is not the true limit because this is bottlenecked by our hardware. So if If tested on a bigger hardware, then this model can have even more speedups. Now, now that we have implemented the DLWSs, we compare it with the OMP. Now, for sparse bands, we look at the PDOB. For the PDOB, we can see that the DLWSs is at least as good or sometimes even better than the OMP algorithm for almost all channels. So there is very little variation over the channels, and the maximum PDOB improvement is about 12%. So here you can see the OMP is at around 85 and my DLWSS is around 98. So there is a 12-13% improvement over for the DLWSS. Now, when we look at dense bands, what happens is we look at the PDAB, the probability detection of all bands. So here we can see a massive improvement for the DLWSS with compared to OMP. But if you look at the probability of detection of occupied bands, there is this dip for the DLWSS. Now, this our explanation for this dip could be that since the number of bands to predict are also high, and the SNR value is also very low, that means in a very highly noisy condition, the model is finding it very hard to fit the hypothesis for predicting like 6 to 7 bands. As a result, this performance is not good. But after this minus 14 dB, the maximum performance improvement you get is around 30% over OMP, which is a very substantial improvement. In terms of runtime, OMP is around 20 times faster than DLWSS. So there is absolutely no competition in terms of runtime with OMP. But the real value of the DLWSS, it lies in the accuracy in terms of sparse and dense, like greater than minus 14 dB data. So, and also it does not require any knowledge about the sparsity, while OMP, as we saw before, it kind of mandatorily requires you the sparsity information. So DLWSS is extremely useful when it comes to high precision and low overhead applications. Now, now that we have established that the DLWSS is good, we try to optimize it further. So the first optimization is the hardware software co-design. So we do our designing on the Zinc chip. So the Zinc chip has the ARM cores as well as a FPGA or the PL fabric. So this ARM cores can be used efficiently to compute the sequential task, like which cannot be parallelized. So that since ARM cores have higher frequency, it can compute those things faster, while the parallelizable aspects of the algorithm can be mapped to the FPGA. Now, to understand which of the following has to be mapped to the PS and which has to be mapped to the PL, you have to perform an analysis of different blocks, and you need to see which blocks suit the processor and which block suits the FPGA. Now, this is the result of that analysis. So you can see when the blocks on hardware, when it is NA, that is nothing is on hardware, then the execution time is around 30.8 seconds. So while the resolution is 0, and this power, this is basically the FPGA power. So FPGA power is also 0. But as soon as I move my convolution to the software, my execution time reduces from 31 seconds to 2.8 seconds. So while this obviously costs you a lot of hardware resources and also the power consumption increases, but this is a very significant improvement as compared to pure software. Now, as you add the fully connected layer, and or if you add the pre-processing layer along with the convolution to the hardware, there is very less improvement on the execution time as compared to just convolution on hardware, while the resource utilization has significantly increased, and also consequently the power consumption has also increased. So even if we add everything on hardware, that is the pre-processing plus the convolution plus the fully connected layer plus the activation, even if you add everything on hardware, then also the performance improvement is very marginal as compared to just having the convolution on hardware. That is you can ideally just keep this on hardware and do everything else on software, and in the process you can save a lot of hardware resources, and also you can save on power. So this was the hardware software co-design. Now we'll talk about the fixed point quantization. So in fixed point, there are two parts to a fixed point number. One is the integer part and another is the fractional part. So the integer part of the fixed point, it is calculated by checking the range of the data the fixed point will be working on. So in our case, it's a CNN. So we need to find the ranges of the data that each layer takes, and then we need to decide what's the optimal integer bit width for that. So for that, we take a sample of the data and we pass it through the DLWSS, and we see the ranges of the activations and the weights that is taken by the model, both the fully connected and the convolution layers. So we find that for activations, both the fully connected and the convolution layer, the integer part can be quantized in 9 bits, while for the weights, the integer part can be represented in just 2 bits. So that means that we can have 9 bits for integer for activations and 2 bits integer for weights. But the second part of the fixed point is the fractional part. So this fractional part, the only way to find the optimal fractional part is through ablation study. I mean, you have to run for different values of fractional part while keeping the integer part to be fixed, and then when the accuracy is good enough for you, and you have the resource versus accuracy trade-off, then you decide on the fractional part. So an optimization over this fixed point quantization would be to have full integer weights with fixed point activation. Now the weights are stored in the blockram in an integer form by calculating the 0 point and the scaling factors. So we can so from this equation you can see that we can quantize the weight from a floating point to a fixed point by calculating this scaling point and scaling factor and 0 point factor, scaling factor and the 0 point, and we can store them in an 8-bit form. For example, you can even compress to 4 bits or 16 bits. You can store them in that 8-bit form or whatever compressed form in your BRAM. So BRAM utilization will significantly reduce as compared to using a 32-bit float to store, right? So you can improve your BRAM consumption by quantizing the weights. But to save on accuracy, just before calculating the dot product with the input, you can dequantize back the quantized weight. So this expression, it will convert it back to the fixed point. So you can have fixed point activations and floating point, fixed point activation and fixed point weight in the computation part, but while storing, you can store the weights in your 8-bit. This is expected to save us a lot of block RAM. Now we look at the word length optimization results which we have. So here, this is for this 22 to 29 is the variation of the word length. For like 9 is the integer width which is fixed, and this 22 to 29 is the fractional part of the activations which is varied. So, and this is the single precision floating point, which is your normal 32-bit floats, and this is the half precision floating point, which is your 16-bit floats. And again, you can see the power performance and area results. So these highlighted parts are the best performing areas for both for every column. So for the runtime, you can see that there is not much improvement across the board, but the half precision floating point is around zero point 0.2 seconds better than everything else. Then in terms of accuracy, of course, the single precision floating point is going to be the most accurate in terms of in both sparse and dense data. But if you look at the 28 bits representation, fixed point representation, and even the half precision floating point representation, the accuracy drop as compared to single precision FP is very low. So that means you can even use this 28-bit word length for your purposes, while these fixed point and even the half precision have very much less resource utilization as compared to the SPFP. Now, for the resource utilization, of course, the lowest word length have the lowest resource utilization and consequently the lowest power consumption. But I like to pay attention to this. This is the uh, block RAM consumption when you store your weights in, just store your weights in the integer form. So we are still computing in fixed point, but just by storing the weights in integer form, you can reduce the block RAM consumption by from 248 to around 80. So that's a massive improvement. Now I'll show you the demo for the GUI, which we use for the real-time visualization of the predictions. So this GUI, it takes the predictions from model running on FPGA, and it reads them and it displays them in an interpretable manner at real time. Now the data from the FPGA is first transferred to a host machine automatically, and then the visualizations are performed. So now I'll show you the demo. Okay, so I will start the demo now. Okay. So that was the demo for the DLWSS. So thank you for listening.